Welcome to the Explainer. Today we are diving into a really powerful and honestly pretty dramatic story from the Quran. It's all about a divine test, a super clever deception, and a consequence that is, well, you'll see. It's pretty shocking. So, this whole story really hinges on one central question. Can you technically follow the letter of a divine law while completely, totally defying its spirit? Is there a loophole when it comes to God's commands? Let's find out. All right, let's set the scene. Our story starts with the Israelites, a community living right by the sea around the time of Prophet David. And they were given a very, very specific command. You have to understand, for this community, the Sabbath wasn't just a day off. No, it was a sacred covenant, a huge part of their identity and their faith that they had promised to uphold. And the rule was crystal clear, absolutely no ambiguity. Saturday was for rest and worship, period. And for a community whose entire life revolved around the sea, this meant one big thing: no fishing. That was the law. That was the promise. In this is where the real conflict kicks in. God sets up this almost paradoxical trial, designed to push the absolute limits of their faith and their obedience. It was a test that pitted their prosperity directly against their principles. And here, you can just see how intense this test was. On Saturday, the one day they were forbidden to work, the shores were literally teeming with fish. I mean, so many they were practically jumping onto the land. But on every other day of the week, the 6 days they were allowed to fish, nothing. The sea was completely barren. The temptation must have been absolutely immense, just sitting there, right in front of their eyes. So, faced with this incredible temptation, seeing all that wealth just swimming out of reach, some people in the community came up with what they thought was a brilliant, cunning workaround. You see their logic here, right? They reasoned, hey, we're not technically fishing on Saturday. They would do all the setup work on Friday, digging trenches, setting nets, and then on Sunday, they'd just come and collect the fish that had trapped themselves. So in their minds, they were following the letter of the law. But they were completely trampling all over its spirit. It was a deception, plain and simple, designed to justify their own greed. Now, an act of deception this blatant doesn't just go unnoticed. Of course not. It actually caused a deep, deep fracture within the community, splitting them into 3 totally distinct groups, each with a very different reaction to what was happening. And this is where the social drama really gets interesting. First, you had the transgressors, the rule breakers, who were getting rich off their little scheme. Then you had the righteous group, who were actively speaking out, begging them to stop, reminding them of their promise to God. And then there was this third group, the silent ones. They basically just threw up their hands and said, why even bother? These people are doomed anyway. It's pointless to warn them. Well, the warnings from the righteous group, they went completely unheeded. The trickery continued, and it just became a normal part of life in the town. And then the divine reckoning arrived, and it was sudden and it was decisive. Imagine waking up one morning to find that this shocking divine decree had actually happened. The transgressors were faced with a punishment that would echo through time as a lesson for everyone. Now, scholars have kind of 2 main ways of looking at this. Was it a literal physical transformation? Did their bodies actually turn into apes as the shocking, undeniable miracle? Or was it more of a metaphorical transformation? A moral decay so profound that their very humanity was stripped away, leaving only base instincts like greed and agitation, essentially becoming apes in their character, if not in their physical form. Whichever interpretation you go with, the outcome was final. The transformed people, they only lived for 3 days before they all perished. They left no descendants, their lineage just ended. The sources are really clear on this part. Only the group that actively spoke out against the sin was saved. And what about the silent group? Well, their fate is a bit of a debate, but a lot of scholars conclude that by failing to forbid evil, they shared in the punishment. So why is this ancient story still so important? Why do we still talk about it? Well, because it is absolutely packed with timeless lessons about faith, community, and the sneaky ways we can deceive ourselves. When you really boil it down, the takeaways are so clear. Integrity is way more important than technicalities. Speaking up against wrongdoing isn't just a nice thing to do, it's a vital responsibility. And maybe the most powerful lesson of all is the warning that real societal decay often kicks off when good people see something wrong and choose to do nothing. And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? Where do we see this today? People bending rules to the breaking point, justifying their actions with clever loopholes while totally ignoring the spirit of the law. And, maybe more importantly, what's our role when we see it happening? Are we the ones who speak up? Or are we the ones who stay silent?